The 2024 Bassmaster Elite Series kicked off today, just a few hours ago. So let's break down the entire season. Let's talk about the events we're most excited for, who we think is going to win.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's going to be a bad day.
What is going on, folks? Welcome back to the OneCast here. Got Trey and myself here in the studio. Pete is actually down in Florida right now doing some fishing on the Kissimmee chain, right?
That's
down
right,
on Toho. Yep. So he's having a blast down there. I tell you what, I wish we were down there, especially after watching the Okeechobee event this last weekend or so. But the Bassmaster Elite Series starts today. I know we like to do our previews every single year. We've got a little bit behind because we've had some great guests on and we've been running around. I've been at expos. You all were at the Anglers Choice event and had a great episode up there. But I'm excited to talk about the season. But before we get started here, as always, make sure you go to OneCastFishing.com, join the snagless revolution, get those long neck hooks, weedless nets, soft plastics. Use the code TheOneCast. Save a little bit of money when you check out there. And then also make sure you go over to CarolinaWatersNC.com. Excellent organization. I'm not wearing today, but I've been wearing their hoodie a lot lately. Excellent hoodies. I picked one up at the Raleigh Expo. They've got excellent performance fishing gear as well. So make sure you check them out, especially all your Carolina boys and girls out there. You know, we got to rep this state, rep the water. Right. So go over there, use the code TheOneCast too, and save a little bit of money.
Yeah, and especially if you guys you got some hot apparel from Carolina Waters, you got the snagless revolution with OneCast Fishing. But if you're in the market, and you know the market drives everything, the economy drives everything. But if you're in that situation right now where you're looking for a new home to buy or land to purchase for next hunting season or whatever the case may be, our buddy Eric Schwinn at Mossy Oak Properties has the paradise that you're looking for. You can shoot him a message at 936-494-9686 or shoot him an email at ESCHWIND, that's eschwind at mossyoakproperties.com. He's got tons of different landscapes, rolling hills, natural waterways, all the things that an avid outdoorsman or somebody that's just trying to get away from the concrete jungle is looking for that nice peace and quiet and nature's beautiful things that it has to offer. So again, hit him up at 936-494-9686 or eschwind, ESCHWIND at mossyoakproperties.com. Let him know that the OneCast sent you and he'll get you squared away with your little slice of paradise. So the bass fishing world is heating up.
Yes, it is.
I mean, it's on fire, and it's amazing because in North Carolina, like it's not really on fire. I mean, there's certain lakes that are definitely producing good fish, but the boys down south are having a good time.
They are. It has been a blast to see some of the results. Most of you all who probably listen or watch us, however you all decide to do that, we usually film these a week or two in advance, and so we just got done watching the Bassmaster Open series down in Okeechobee, and I know the Elite Series blasted off this morning. If you're listening to this on Thursday or the 22nd, but it seemed like the Bassmaster season got started early this year.
That's right.
Because that Okeechobee event, I mean, it had me watching. I was flipping back and forth between the NPFL and Bassmaster, and certainly on Championship Sunday. I mean, I was glued to the Bassmaster coverage because it was a phenomenal event, and they had the hometown boy do it.
Yeah, I mean, with Bass changing the way that they're marketing and promoting the Opens and the Elite qualifiers, they're one and the same. Elite qualifiers, all those guys are fishing all 9 events with the chance of being in the top 9 to qualify for the 2025 Bassmaster Elite Series. But, Ben and I talked about it before the show. It was probably one of the best thing that Bassmaster could have done was, put a little bit more effort and what's the word I'm looking for? Just effort to highlight how competitive the Opens are. And if you listen to some people, some that fish the Opens, look at the field in the Opens, right? You got a lot of former Elite Series guys in the Opens. You got former BPT guys, former FLW guys, and then you got the new young guns that are up and coming, and they're all trying to build their individual brand. They're trying to make a name for themselves. And so now with Bass covering all 9 events with cameras and stuff like that, it makes it feel like it's the elites. It really does.
It does, because the coverage is only on Championship Sunday, so it's the top 10. But when we look at the open events, we had a bunch of elite anglers drop down. I mean, you had like Drew Bitton in there, I believe. You had or Drew Cook. I forget which one. One was fishing MPFL, and the other one was at the event.
Drew Cook's fishing MPFL. Yep.
You had Randall Tharp, coming over from VPT, was 3rd in the event.
Yep.
And old school Bassmaster, the Honey Badger himself, Tyler Rivette was there. You had several elite guys in the top 25, and you've had some other guys who were trying to make it back, and then you've got some young guns in there. And so, I think having some of those recognizable names certainly helps out the draw, helps out the coverage. But to be honest, first event in the year, you had Scott Martin break records, the single day, bag record for the Open, this, the tournament record for an Open with 30 pounds a day average, over
That's
90
right.
pounds, and the largest 3-day bag ever for a Bassmaster tournament on his home lake. And Scott Martin's a huge draw. He's got a lot of fans, and to have him, run it wire to wire, and, everybody was tuning in, and just how small the event fished, and he was able to fish slow and, catching 2 9-pounders back to back.
Yeah.
It was crazy. So great for Bass, for marketing, for viewership, I'm sure. I mean, they started the season off strong.
That's right. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, because we're going to move into that schedule, like Ben said, Scott Martin's patience in this one was, in his decision making, you saw the difference this tournament than you did last year when they fished Okeechobee. He slammed it on day 1, but days 2, 3, and 4, it didn't go so well. And so I don't know what he did, if he changed anything, but I can tell you from watching the coverage on what was it, Sunday? Was it Sunday? That 3-day derby, right?
I think it's Saturday.
Or Saturday.
Saturday,
yeah. He had boats all around him.
I listened to several podcasts afterwards, you guys who fished it on Bass Talk Live. I think it a couple guys on. It fished really small this year. You had some guys down South Bay, and I think it's either Harvey's Pond, Harney's Pond over there is where everyone was concentrated. And they were like, yeah, Scott was right in there. He put his power pole down, didn't move for like 2 hours.
Nope.
Or he's just fishing super, super slow.
Yep. So I think this is a huge deal for him, because he's got that pressure taken off his shoulders for the 2025 Bassmaster Classic. Like, he doesn't have to worry about that going into this 2024 season, which we're getting ready to talk about. And what a special moment to win, kind of like who won on Lay Lake last year. He was a home favorite. Jeez, I would forget, but
it's like Livesey
on Fork, and all these winning on your home lake's a hard challenge, and that had to be super special. And everybody from his family was there. But this isn't the Scott Martin show. This is talking about the 2024 Bassmaster Elite Series, and let's jump into it. So, what's the first event, Ben?
Yeah, I was looking at the schedule here before we recorded this evening, and Bassmaster's got several events that are back to back. So maybe we can just kind of take them back to back, because they're relatively close to each other. So, this week, today started, they're down there at Toledo Bend. And then next week, they just move a couple hours over, or 3 or 4 hours over, how far it is over to Lake Fort in Texas.
Yep.
And so I suspect these will be phenomenal events. I mean, if you guys are listening to this by Sunday or Monday, then you know who won the Toledo Bend one. We know MLF was just there. It was a pre-spawn event. I suspect it will be the same, because I pulled the weather up, and maybe who knows with the weather. Maybe there'll be a few spawners, but it doesn't look like it's going to get super warm. So probably another pre-spawn, and it could be one of those things come like Sunday. Maybe they're moving up or something.
Yeah.
But I suspect a lot of big bags, both Toledo Bend and then next week at Fork. I mean, they're big bass lakes.
Yeah. So the guys on the BPT talked about them being there just a little too early. We're talking Toledo Bend, and you saw, Cliff Crochet catching 11-pounder, multiple 6-7 pound bass were caught.
You said a little too early, I think, on like day 2 or something, or I think day Group B, day 1 or something like that. It was like, I think I counted 7 or 8 pounders.
Yeah.
Caught. I mean, it's and last year or the year before, the lakes has produced 40-pound bags down.
Let me back that up. early is relative, but I meant early for the spawn. So they think that they were early for the spawn, and you saw all the anglers out there, scoping them and catching them in open water, like channel swings and stuff like that. I don't know if any of those guys are fishing shallow. I predict on Toledo Bend, when the elites are there today, that there's going to be potentially a spawn going on. But again, like you said, it's all about the weather.
It's one of those things, because we know when the spawn road happens here in North Carolina. It's typically April, maybe early, maybe bleeding into March, bleeding into May a little bit.
Yeah.
I know down there in Texas or, in Louisiana, where it's usually March and April.
Yeah.
So with this event, the last weekend of February, and then moving even over the fork, like the first week of March, who knows?
Yeah. So
who knows?
So I'm going to predict, I think everybody's going to jack them on Toledo Bend, but who's coming off a hot streak for Toledo Bend right now? And that's Ben Milliken, right? So Milliken's fishing the Elite Series this year. Granted, though, they fished it at a different time last year, from my understanding, right? They weren't there in February. And Ben found them on an offshore pattern on the shoals and things like that, deep cranking them. But you know what? He could run right into big pre-spawn schools that are getting ready to move up. So I think Ben's looking it up right now, but I think Milliken has momentum going into this tournament. Scott Martin has momentum going into this tournament because he just won Okeechobee. But really, the new guys that moved into the Elite Series, all of them did really well. And I think it's going to be, I don't think somebody's going to pull away with it. I think it's going to be an absolute slugfest. I really do. So
I 100% agree too.
Yep.
Because I just pulled it up. The 2023 Open at Toledo Bend was in April. So it was about 6 weeks later.
Yep.
So I think he probably had postponers too, if I remember. So look, if they're spawning, it's a sight fishing event. They're going to pull some big girls off the beds, and right, if it's pre-spawn, like those fish have already probably started moving.
Yep.
They're probably not in their winter hunt still.
Yep.
But whether or not it's going to be a spawn event, I don't know. But those fish will be moving. They'll be feeding because it's getting close. If they're not spawning, then it'll be within a couple weeks.
Yeah. Well, and if it is a spawn event, I don't know how Milliken is on spawn events. I can tell you that Drew Cook, Drew Benton, John Cox, gosh, I'm forgetting everyone's name right now, but Luke Palmer, Jason Christie, a lot of those guys, they are so seasoned when it comes to sight fishing. Bernie Scholes, he's really good. He's never won an Elite Series event, but he's always been right there. I think the new guys are going to do. I think the new guys are going to have the momentum, but the veterans are going to bring the skills necessary to kind of close that deal out. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I can even see if it ends up being more of a shallow water game because the fish have moved up. Then even someone like a Hackney or Swindle, maybe he can pull out his first blue trophy.
There you go. Yeah.
Lake Fort is the very next week. In fact, it starts the 29th of February, so the leap year there.
Yep.
Leap year day. And then it ends the 3rd of March. And so, I suspect it will probably be very similar to Toledo Bend in the sense that, the stage where the fish are at. And it could be one of those that just kind of continues depending on weather. It just gets better and better throughout the event. Livesey is going to be the favorite going in for sure because he's won the last two on this lake.
Yeah.
I think it was Century Belt both times.
Imagine if he pulls out a hat trick, right? And he wins for a third time in a row. I did hear that Lake Fork is up right now. And that might change the game a little bit. Lake Fork's very hazardous. There's a lot of standing timber in that place. Toledo Bend is very hazardous as well. So, the elites going to Lake Fork with a little bit of elevated water levels where fish are able to get where they haven't traditionally been able to get in the past. All that vegetation that's grown for years now is submerged. This might be a whole different Lake Fork than what we're traditionally used to seeing. I'm sure that, Lee has a lot more experience than anybody else. So it's probably still in his favor. But if it's like you said, a spawn event, it can go any way. It's not just one person's way. So Lee may be on 6-7 pound caliber fish in the spawn. Heck, Trey McKinney may be on 8-9 class fish. So I don't know. But the cool thing is, though, is the 2024 Elite Series, they're starting in Texas. They got 2 in Texas, like Florida's not there. And it's kind of cool to see them shake it up a little bit. So
yeah, last thing I'll say with the Texas stops here. So stop 1 and 2. It'll be interesting to see if the lakes are set up very similar, how much live scope plays a role in the two. Does it play more in one than the other? Because I'm just thinking with all the standing timber there at Fork, it's a live scope central. There is that game, jerkbait, square bills that time of year, targeting fish in those timber flats basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Toledo Bend's got timber, it's got laydowns, and it's got docks. I mean, I think it's got vegetation too. I think the hydrilla is growing in there. So a lot of different ways to fish it. It'll be interesting to see how similar they'll fish, back-to-back weeks. So,
and then the next event, and this is this is the 2020, the top 50. And I think there's 5 added to it through Bass Nation and other things. But then they slide over to Oklahoma and the Classic begins. And I know the local favorite there, and that's March 22nd through the 24th. The Classic's a 3-day event. The hometown favorite to win that, Jason Christie.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah.
That's his body of water. I don't know what that one's going to look like. I think Christie even talked about it in a couple shows. Depending on the weather, he really hopes that they get really terrible weather.
So they're not spawning.
Well, he's looking at it this way. If it's consistent throughout, really a lot of people have a chance. But if there's a lot of weather variables, he has the experience on that body of water to react to whatever situation comes abroad. So, if they have perfect weather, it may be anybody's game. What has taken people 10 to 15 years to really break down on a body of water with technology, the learning gap is a lot smaller. So we'll see what happens with that. But if they have a bunch of inclement weather, ups and downs, rains, clouds, sun, all that stuff, Jason Christie may have the experience on that lake to really pull out something special. So the Bassmaster Classic, man, it's the biggest Bassmaster or the biggest bass fishing event ever. And I think Grand is going to show out with that one.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Super Bowl of bass fishing. And while you were talking there, I'm thinking, we should probably do a full episode breaking down, the week before it begins or that Thursday, whenever it starts, and give our picks for it. Because Christie's the favorite going into it, but we talked about it. It is hard to win on your home lake.
It is.
There's, because we all know sometimes history is not your friend. Now, these guys at this level, I think a lot of them have a tendency to ignore that history. And for some reason, they're just good at be able to reading the conditions and remember, 25 years ago, this happened.
Yeah.
Right. Let's go test this spot out.
Mm-hmm.
So it can hurt you or harm you, but it's going to be a great event. And I don't think it's going to take a lot of weight. I think it's going to be 12 to 16 pounds a day type of deal, depending on weather. Somewhere within there will probably be the winning bags.
Yeah. And I have to correct myself. Will Davis Jr. won on Lay Lake. That was his home lake. So last year I felt bad. I was sitting there thinking about the whole time. So Scott Martins won on Okeechobee. Will Davis Jr. won. Scott Canterbury got real close on Lay Lake last year, and that's kind of his quote unquote home lake. And then Lee Livesey's won multiple times in Lake Fork. So can Christie pull out a home lake victory at the largest fishing tournament in the world?
We've got about 2 months and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's right.
Trey, you mentioned it was unique because the Bassmasters, the elites are starting again in Texas this year, because for years, it seems like one of the first 2 events are always in Florida. Yeah, they're going to Florida this year and they're back-to-back events, but they're not going to April.
No.
You got the Harris chain starting the 14th finishing the 14th of April, and then St. John's finishing a week later on the 21st. What do you think about these 2 events?
We got buddies down there right now messing around on Kissimmee. A lot of them set up similar as far as the fish movement, spawn and stuff like that. They fish a little bit differently, and both you and I have a little, 0.1% experience on those places. But, if you know anything about Florida, the bass react to weather. They're very finicky. And so, with this being in April, it could be a shallow water. Shallow water is relative, by the way, because when you talk to offshore fishing in Florida, depending on where you're at, could be 8 foot. You know what I mean? So I think you're going to see I think you're going to see much smaller bags than traditional because they're going to be lighter. They're going to be off, like, hiding under mats or, in current breaks and stuff like that, or on shell bars, and I think live scope is definitely going to play in those tournaments, especially if somebody can find, schools of fish, kind of like Milliken did last year in the last open event. I think were they on Kissimmee for the last open event, or the Harris chain, one of the two. But I think that you're going to see, areas that you would look at as traditional, like offshore areas in Florida really play a role. So, April, going there in April, it's going to be fun. It's going to be warm. It's probably going to be crowded, but these guys are so good. They're going to figure out how to get those big post spawn fish to bite. So interesting though. And it's kind of cool. I mean, the elites really hang out in the South for a good long time. You know what I mean? So, but yeah. And then, St. John's River, I've never been to the Harris chain of lakes, but you have, right?
I've spent a couple of weeks on it.
You spent a couple of weeks on the Harris chain of lakes. St. John's River, great place. Lake George is connected to it. It's one of the bigger lakes connected, I believe. A lot of cypress trees, a lot of alligators, a lot of lily pads in the river system. The river flows south to north, which I thought was super cool when I went down there. John Cruz has a win on the St. John's River. I think, what was that, 20? I can't remember what year it was, but it was a handful of years ago.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, yep. And he was doing some damage on a bladed jig on the outside of those lily pads. But, I think both of them are going to be great events. I think you're going to the cool thing about Florida is everybody can do, they can fish their strengths, minus like deep water drop shotting and stuff, but you can still scope them. You can still flip, you can still top water, so all those things combined makes Florida a really great place to go. I just don't know what it's going to look like in April, but I'm sure that we're going to see 20-pound bags busted in those tournaments.
I am super excited for these two events. It's probably my two favorite events on the schedule. And it's for the fact that they're not there in January, February, or the first week of March. We don't have to play this cold front game. I mean, there could still be cold fronts, but we're not talking to drop them out of moving up and not moving up. By this point, they're going to be post-spawn bass. I mean, they say bass will spawn all year long in Florida. I'm sure, a few happen here and there. I've seen stories. People say they spawn in July out there. They've seen it. Yeah. And look, I believe it because there's so many fish out there. Who knows? But for the most part, they're going to be post-spawn bass. And I will pretty much guarantee the Harris chain will be one offshore.
Yeah.
That lake, even in January, February, March, unless the waves are moving up to spawn, you got to be offshore.
Yeah.
You may be 5 foot in water, but then you may be a click off the bank or something, up there in Lake Griffin or something. So, but I'm excited for it too, because you'll probably have someone's going to find a shallow bite on one of the lakes and one of the canals where it's popping off. But I think it's going to be one offshore, either on shell beds or some type of, offshore grass. And that stuff changes around. Each lake's different every single year. The shell beds move around, but it will be nice to see it, how they fish it, how they target it, much like MOF did a couple years ago when they went to the Kissimmee in April or May. Because most of us, if we want to go down and fish in Florida, it's rare for us to get down there when there's a wave moving up.
That's right.
In January, February, or March. Like most of our vacation schedules for most of us anglers across, if we want to take a trip down there, there's going to be some other time during the year. So it'll be nice to see how they target that. And the St. John's too. Look, I'm not nearly as confident how that's going to be won. When John was there 2 years ago, he won, I believe, in the river because, his bite was an hour later each day because of the tide. I could see Lake George playing a bigger role this time of year. It'll be interesting how they play that come in April, but they should definitely be biting. I'm super excited for these two events here.
Yeah, so am I. And Florida is always a cool place, especially when it's not in January or February. Like Ben said, seeing a different time of year is going to put the anglers in a different way. It's going to test different skills and stuff like that. So, history is good. But when you have it in a different time of year, sometimes that history doesn't play very well. So we'll see what that looks like. And then, so April 11th, Harris chain starts, April 14th, it ends. Then the 18th through the 21st. You got St. John's, and then they slide up a little bit closer to our neck of the woods.
Yeah, a couple weeks later, 3 weeks later, I'm trying to do the math quick in my head. They're coming up here to Lake Murray in Columbia, South Carolina, which is about 3.5 hours south of us.
Mhm.
So maybe we'll get the opportunity to go down there. And I'm not sure. I think Pete might be trying to actually.
He's marshaling on that one.
Yeah, he's marshaling. So that's going to be a good event. I remember when BPT went to Murray last year it was April or May. I mean, it showed out. That lake came back. They were monster bags of largemouth. So.
I think the Elite Series went to Murray last year, didn't they? Hunter Shryack was like slamming them on top water.
I think they both did.
Yeah, they both did.
They both did, and one was a few weeks later. So I suspect the lake will show out again. Largemouth lake. It's got blueback herring. That's probably going to be.
That's blueback herring spawning time right there.
And it's going to be a post-spawn event.
Yep.
There's a chance that depending on weather, maybe there's a few. The issue could be if the fish are kind of in that sometimes that week that post-spawn blue.
Yep.
Blues. I mean, that is a threat for that tournament. Now these guys are so good, and someone's going to find out and catch them. But
yeah, and I have no idea on that lake if there's bass that assign themselves exclusively to eating just shad, and then there's bass that are just eating blueback herring. But I think you're going to see a lot of top water, a lot of walking baits, pencil poppers, a lot of jerk baits, a lot of things like that. That one is really going to be dominated probably on the herring spawn, but could be, fish always prove us wrong. So we have no idea, but Columbia, South Carolina, May 9th through the 12th, the Elite Series are heading close to the OneCast neck of the woods. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to that one.
Yep.
And then the next couple of events, we'll just go ahead and skip on down. So they have actually got about a month break after that, and they're not going quite back to back. There's a week in between, but the next two events I think we should talk about together because they're both in Alabama.
Yep.
So from the June 6th, the 13th to the 16th, they're in Wheeler Lake, and then a week, 2 weeks later, the 27th to the 30th, they're at Smith Lake. So these will be two very interesting tournaments. Wheeler Lake on the Tennessee River system. It's right below Gunnersville. So look, that time of year, June, we could see offshore ledge fishing. I don't know what the grass is looking like. We know those Tennessee River lakes, they change around a lot.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of current's going to play a role there for sure. It could be a phenomenal event, or it could be a kind of crappy event.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess that's every event, but
yep. Yeah, Wheeler. I don't know a lot about Wheeler. I can't remember the last time that they had an Elite Series event there. But I think the guys that are really dialed into the offshore pattern, like you said, I think they're the ones that are going to find a victory on that lake. But all of these lakes that we talk about, to include the Florida river system or fish water systems, for the most part, minus probably Grand Lake, these lakes change a lot. Some of these lakes are on upswings like Toledo Bend. Some of them are on downswings. You see Kentucky Lake that's kind of making a comeback. Gunnersville is close to what Ben just talked about. Wheeler.
Yeah, I believe the dam right above Wheeler.
Yeah, Gunnersville. If Wheeler is setting up like Gunnersville is on a upswing with a significant amount of fish, like 3 to 5 pound class fish. The 6 to 9 pound class fish, people aren't catching as many anymore, but I think that's just the lake going through its turnover.
If I remember correctly, the last time they were at Gunnersville, or maybe this was 2 or 3 years ago, but it was a May or June event, I believe. And it was still one up shallow in the grass if I remember, and punching a little bit. Some guys got on some of the, this was Gunnersville, some of those ledge fish and schools out there. But it was one up shallow in the grass. And so depending on how the grass is and if there's grass in Wheeler, and because we know that all changes year to year, it changes based upon water levels. If they, I don't know what Alabama's doing, or the, spraying, or what they're doing to control any of that stuff. So it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to actually tuning into like the pre-tournament updates to see kind of what the lake is doing. Cause that's going to, tell us a lot of how that tournament's going to go. And then over at Smith Lake, which is It's probably a couple hours south, an hour and a half south of Wheeler Lake, but it's a spotted bass lake. I know there's some largemouth in there, but it's a big spotted bass lake. And when I looked it up, it's not on the Coosa River. I don't know if it's in the same watershed, to be honest, but it's two other rivers drain into it. It's just a big spotted bass lake. So I suspect forward facing sonar, almost July out. I mean, that's
what's going to be.
Yep.
You better watch out for like Koya Fujita and Patrick Walters and Brandon Polinek and all. But, a lot of these guys are getting really, really dialed in, not because probably they want to, but because they have to.
Well, they have to
stay competitive.
And that's like when we started off the episode, we were talking about Okeechobee. I mean, the guys were using live scope to sight fish and 4 foot of water.
Yeah. I almost wonder, if you see them on forward-facing sonar, do they have to be hooked in the mouth?
I don't know.
Is that sight fishing, right? Yeah. And so the guys that are pairing, either putting a transducer in perspective mode and then a transducer in, I guess you would call it live scope mode, or I don't know, forward-facing mode, or guys that are using, Mega 360 paired with forward-facing sonar. That's how Scott Martin really dominated on Okeechobee, is he was using his Panoptics to find the holes where the fish were bedding, and he could tell the fish behavior based on watching them on sonar. So all these lakes, sonar is going to play a role. It just depends on, what stage the fish are in and stuff like that. But for Wheeler and Smith, like you said, they're going to be offshore. Smith being a spotted bass lake, they're going to find some mega schools, and who knows, I don't know if that place sets up like smallmouth territory where you could catch 2 pounders, 3 pounders, but you really need 3.5 pounders. I have no idea. So we'll see what that looks like, but it's cool. And that's when
I want to add one more thing with another thing that makes me excited is I'm glad they're going back to some of these lakes in Alabama in the summertime.
Yep.
For that offshore kind of old school bite.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, a lot of times they have an early season and then they take a couple months off and then they run up north and we see the northern swings. We'll talk about in a second, but we've got 2 lakes here in June in Alabama, and that's going to be fun as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's just talk about the last 2 here. That stops 8 or 9, and it is back to back again. So I don't know if that was a angler driven or the decision for that. It's in some ways I could see anglers enjoying this because you get more time at home, but at the same time, and that's a long, it's almost a month long because you get a week before and then your week after the 2 events. But stop 8 or 9. So August 8th through the 11th, they're at Champlain and they're going out to Plattsboro, New York. And then stop 9 is the St. Lawrence River, the 15th through the 18th. So, look, we know these are probably going to be phenomenal events. I mean, Champlain, I know a largemouth bite can play depending on how it sets up. But the St. Lawrence River, I mean, we know what that is. I mean,
I think everybody's going to be going and chasing brownfish on both of those bodies of water. But much like Florida, not that the bass or not that the bass in the north are affected by weather, the boats are affected by weather, right? So, Lake Champlain, I think they refer to that as like the 6th Great Lake, if I'm not mistaken, but weather is going to play a factor, getting out to where they want to go to.
Especially the St. Lawrence when they want to go out on
the
lake.
Yep. And they want to go towards, St. Lawrence connects, that's Canada and America, right? So, both of those are going to be really interesting. The smallmouth typically spawn in like the June time frame from my understanding up north. But we don't know. There was records that were broke last year. Was it Bryant Smith broke the
well, last year at the St. Lawrence, they had 3 century belts because the year before Shakur had the 1 century belt won it. Then and they had perfect weather 2 years ago. Last year it was not perfect weather. Nope. And some guys were forced to go out there because they had to make a cut to stay on tour. And it was kind of rough out there.
Yeah, like 8-footers, like Matty Wong is, he said he was surfing, and if there's anybody that can do it, it's Matty. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think smallmouth fit, when they do the live coverage and they pair the scoping on the screen if they're going to do that this year. And I know we've seen it with the NPFL. They did a really good job with it.
And Bass did it with the Classic at least.
Yep. Bass did it with a Classic where, Gussie was out on, what lake was that?
In Tennessee River.
It was the Tennessee River. Yeah. So he was scoping them in 30 foot of water or whatever. So hopefully at least for these smallmouth events, I would like to see Bass do something like that, especially if the weather's crappy and we can't be fishing. I would like to watch it. But smallmouth events, to me, I don't really watch a lot of them. I just don't. But if they put that screen up there, that's going to entice me to watch that because, these guys are so dialed in on how to, work the bait, the action of the bait compared to the fish behavior and stuff like that. And let's be honest, we say smallmouth are dumb, but at the same time, we've talked to several Elite Series anglers that were up and have been on Champlain and the St. Lawrence River and the Detroit River and all that stuff. And they'll tell you, like, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of fish in there and not all of them bite. So they're not as dumb as we think. So these guys are doing the best they can with the technology they have. Bass, make it a little bit more interesting, put the screen up there. So us anglers who are trying to learn, we get a little bit of free education out of it.
Absolutely. And this is, they're wrapping up with the St. Lawrence River again. That's the Angler of the Year tournament event.
Yep.
So the winner of that is automatically in the Classic, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows what will happen there? Angler of the Year can come down to a bunch of folks. And, last year, they had to make a run at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to happen the last couple of years that the guys, they think they've got it locked up. When I say they, I mean us as commentators and fans and even other elites with like two stops to go. And then something happens and they've got to make it happen on day one or day two to at least make the cut there to qualify, to complete the year as the best angler. So I'm looking forward to it. The only thing I don't like about the St. Lawrence River, and it's hard to say because it is Disney-Mouse Small Land, but you're right. I find myself probably watching less of the live coverage with that event. I watch a lot more of the tournament practice from guys' YouTubes and all.
And the recaps.
Because it does seem like everyone's catching fish. And maybe there's probably just some luck involved of finding the schools that are not 3 pound smallmouth, but 3.5 pound smallmouth, because that's what makes the difference there.
Yep.
All the weights are within ounces. You just have to find those right schools that are about a half a pound heavier. And looking on, live scope and sonar, like sometimes it's hard to tell with all those fish. So
sometimes it's a drum,
and so like I've always thought like those events, if I was an angler on it and there's all these schools and stuff around, you go through practice and you pick them through, you can't find them, but at the same time you could just pull up on the right one. And
that's
be like,
right.
Well, I got
the
first one I went to had the right fish, and I'll save it and I'll find some more. So it is it'll be a phenomenal event.
It'll be, can Kyle Welcher stay with the momentum from the 2023 season? He was the Angler of the Year for the elites. Or is he going to have to pass it off to somebody? And, there's some guys that have been really close. I know that's probably the most coveted title to receive because you are the most consistent angler in the first, smallmouth territory. In my opinion, that's where guys have the opportunity to requalify for the elites, right? Like if you've struggled the first, 5-6 stops, you really have to figure out a way. And we saw that with Matty Wong, last year. He was on the cut, man, and he went out there and risked his life essentially in 8-foot waves. But, that is an opportunity to make up a lot of points. Most people always catch 5 every single day. It's the ones that can find the better quality fish that are going to have the chances. I would love to see one of the Johnstons or, some of the northern guys that have spent their entire life breaking down those bodies of water. I would like to see one of the northern guys pull out a win. Obviously, Jay Shakir won his rookie year up there.
You say that, and if I start thinking about Angler of the Year, I think one of those northern guys, Johnson, Shakir, one of those guys could have a great chance at Angler of the Year, because like the Florida events are not they're good spawn fishers too, right? Sight fishermen and bed fishing, because they've proven that. But like when the Johnson brothers were one of won several years ago on the Harris Chain, it was offshore. Like this is how it's going to set up for them with the vegetation. So I could see, one of the Johnson brothers might win Angler of the Year. I could see it.
Yeah, one of them has always come in, that top 5, top 10 level. And, if you miss a couple fish in a tournament, it can really set you back. That's where smallmouth territory can really get you back into the game. So we'll see, man. It looks like a really good season. I'm really happy that Bass is staying south and just fishing different bodies of water at different times of the year. And it's cool that they're giving, and they stimulate the economy big time when they go to some of these events, So I predict that Luke Palmer, I think I said this last year when we talked about this, I think he's going to win the Classic. For some odd reason, I just feel like he's going to win the Classic. I think one of these new guys is going to win on their rookie year. I think they're going to win a blue trophy. Can JT Tompkins pull out rookie of the year from being the reigning 2023 EQ Angler of the Year? I think there's going to be a lot of history made in 2024. I think there's going to be some records. We've already seen multiple records broken by Scott Martin, and that was in a Bassmaster Open. I think it's going to be a really special year. The economy seems to be, I wouldn't say better, but things are a little bit more stable. Anglers, I'm not seeing the shortages of electronics and the shortages of boats. In fact, people can't really sell boats, so I wouldn't say the economy's great, but anglers got their boats. They're all ready to go. It's going to be a long season for them, though. It's going to be a really long season for them.
It totally is. I agree. I think those guys that you mentioned have a great chance. A couple other people. I think Patrick Walters has a chance to be very consistent this year because he has been the last couple of years. On 2 tours, right? Bassmaster and now the NPFL.
Yep.
I could see him really being dedicated this year and, being very consistent on these events and being the running for Angler of the Year. I also think someone like Cody Huff, who's had some good events that I think it's his 3rd year now on tour. I think, this is maybe the year he puts some more things together. And I think he's been runner up once or twice already, but to win an event and be really consistent throughout the year. So that's another guy we need to look out for.
And I'll tell you the person that I really want to see win the most, I want to see a lot of them win, but I want to see Matty Wong win one.
Absolutely.
And I want to see Carl Jacobson win another one. I know he won in Lake 10 Killer in 2017, I want to say. But, every single one of these anglers has a special story, but some of these guys, I'm a huge advocate. I've said this before. I'm a huge advocate on somebody who hasn't won winning. I want to see everybody win one of these. So, but it's gotten extremely competitive, even more competitive than it's ever been before. And, technology is playing a role in that. The different levels of fishing from high school to college, clubs, Bass Nation, now the One Bass in the West Coast. That's going to be another cool thing. We'll see, they have a chance in the West Coast fishing One Bass to qualify for the Bassmaster Classic. And so there's a lot of moving pieces that are going on right now, but I think the industry, I don't know economically, but from a competitive standpoint, it's awesome. And we're going to see 2024 slingshot real fast.
Yep. And as we wrap it up here, my favorite thing about this schedule for 2024, there's no Sabine River.
I wish there was a Sabine.
I'm looking at the schedule here. Any one of these tournaments can end up being really tough, depending on the phase of the fish, the weather, water levels, current, all that, droughts. We all know that. But when I look at it, I don't see a fishery where I expect 5 fish for 11 pounds a day that's going to win it. I'll tell you what, though, besides smallmouth territory, the Sabine River really helped Matty Wong's points, right? The Sabine River is another place that you can make up some valuable points. So, yeah, man, 2024 Bassmaster Elite Series schedule. You got 8 regular season events, and then the Classic in Grand, Oklahoma. We're really looking forward to it. I do want to, we don't know Miles Berghoff,
but Miles Berghoff, and I know a lot of shows have said this, but the same thing applies from everybody here at the OneCast and all of our fans. Like, we are praying for your family. His daughter was diagnosed with a very rare cancer. They do have a GoFundMe page. We'll find it and put the link in there to support that family through the toughest times. You know, Miles is supposed to fish that first stop in Lake Okeechobee in the opens. And I don't think that happened, and rightfully so. So we are praying for your family, man. And, you know, hopefully your daughter pulls through this. She's at the best hospital in the world, St. Jude's. And, you know, we couldn't think of a better way to really end the show by, you know, ending it on a prayer. We hope everybody has an amazing 2024 season. Ben, you got anything before you close this out? We want you guys to band together, you know, express positivity, always be honest. But at the same time, help us continue to grow a culture of anglers helping anglers one cast at a time.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.